Has your family ever bothered you over baby names? My dad absolutely lost his mind when we announced we were naming our daughter Sage. He kept saying it was a terrible name, that it sounded like a spice, and that people would think we were some kind of hippie weirdos. But his reaction seemed way too intense for just not liking a name. This man had opinions about everything in my life, but this was different. He was genuinely panicked. He started showing up at my house unannounced with baby name books, circling traditional names like Emma, Sarah, and Michelle. He'd sit at my kitchen table for hours, reading me lists of normal names and explaining why each one was better than Sage. Then he escalated to showing up at my work during lunch breaks. He'd corner my coworkers in the parking lot with baby name websites pulled up on his phone, asking them to convince me that Sage was a horrible choice. My boss actually had to talk to him about not harassing employees on company property. When that didn't work, he recruited my grandmother. She started calling me every single morning at 6 a.m. sharp, reading me lists of proper Christian names from her church directory. When I stopped answering her calls, she'd leave these 10-minute voicemails detailing why each name was blessed by God and why Sage would doom my daughter to a life of sin. My husband was getting annoyed with the constant family drama. He kept asking why my dad was so obsessed with this one name. I didn't understand it either. It's not like we were naming her something truly outrageous. Sage is a perfectly normal name that lots of people have. But then my dad crossed a line that made me realize something wasn't right. I found out he'd been telling people at his gym that I was having a midlife crisis and making poor decisions because of pregnancy hormones. He was actually telling strangers that his daughter had lost her mind and needed intervention. That's when I started digging. I called my aunt and asked her if there was any history with the name Sage in our family. She got really quiet and said I needed to ask my dad directly. When I pressed her, she finally admitted that my dad had a coworker named Sage about 15 years ago, right around the time my parents went through that really rough patch in their marriage. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. My dad's extreme reaction wasn't about the name being weird or hippie-like. He was panicking because he knew exactly who I'd be naming my daughter after, even though I had no idea about his history with someone named Sage. I confronted my mom about it, and she broke down crying. She told me that my dad had an affair with a woman named Sage from his office. They almost got divorced over it, but worked things out after months of counseling. She begged me not to use the name, because it would be a constant reminder of the worst time in their marriage. But here's the thing. I had chosen the name Sage months before any of this drama started. I loved it because it meant wisdom and strength. I wasn't going to let his guilty conscience ruin my daughter's name. At our baby shower, right as we were about to reveal the name on the cake, my dad stood up and made this big announcement. He said he'd ordered a custom cake that said, "Welcome baby Elizabeth," because that was his grandmother's name, and it was time I stopped being stubborn about this ridiculous name choice. The whole room went silent. Everyone was staring at him like he'd lost his mind. Who orders a cake with a different name than what the parents chose? I stood up and smiled sweetly. Dad, you're absolutely right about the importance of names and their meanings. I looked directly at him and said, that's exactly why we're naming her Sage, because unlike some people in this room, she'll represent wisdom, faithfulness, and integrity. The room was dead silent as everyone processed what I'd just said. My dad's face went completely white because he knew that I knew. My mom looked like she wanted to crawl under the table. I cut into my original cake that said, "Welcome baby Sage," and served it to everyone while my dad just stood there holding his stupid Elizabeth cake. He hasn't said a single word about baby names since that day. In fact, he's been remarkably quiet about everything involving our family choices. And you know what? My daughter Sage is perfect, and her name suits her beautifully. Sometimes the best revenge is just living your truth and letting guilty people expose themselves.